Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Paul Eaton, Major General, United States Army, retired, and our host today is the Vote Vets Action Fund. About a week ago, we set up a tip line where we could gather stories from veterans on this DOGE impact upon the federal force and at the same time our state and local civilian population working for the betterment of the United States. And some of those stories are going to be shared today by representatives of our grassroots operation. And we're grateful for that. These are real people who represent real people who are going through a tough time out there. And we owe them a great debt, because the representation that they provide is an illustration of what Mr. Musk and his DOGE operation are doing to the federal workforce, state and local. And real people, real stories. I have to point out that Mr. Musk is where he is right now, largely for the due to the largesse of the United States government. $38 billion in preferential loans and raw grant that we have provided this man to keep his business afloat. And a whole lot of contracts go his way. But he's going after 30% of the federal force, our veterans, and in a ready, fire, aim approach with a scatter gun is doing great damage to the federal force. We're going to talk about that today. Real people going through real hard times and an opportunity to illustrate all that. I'll now turn it over to Senator Tammy Duckworth from Illinois, our favorite senator, and a great warrior, a woman of great courage, and a champion for all of us, as well as the wonderful people of the state of Illinois. Senator, over to you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, General Eaton. Well, you're my favorite general, so it's mutual. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Though I wish we could all come together under less interesting circumstances, I actually invited Elon Musk, to join us as well. But I'm not shocked that he didn't have the courage necessary to show up to this forum. After all, he and Trump never actually ever show up with the veterans that they claim to care about. They never actually have our backs. But the good news is that my Democratic colleagues do, including Washington Attorney General Nick Brown and Baltimore County Council Member Pat Young, who are both here with me this afternoon. Look, on the campaign trail, Trump promised to look out for veterans and service members. Obviously, this was a lie. Obviously, a man who claims to know more than our generals who have served honorably for decades. This is a man who calls our fallen service members suckers and losers. A man who cried bone spurs when his nation needed him the most. Obviously, someone as ignorant as this wouldn't mind executing the most craven political move imaginable, using our heroes as political pawns to get elected, then abandoning them once he takes office. Just to give you a summary of the past few weeks, Trump and Musk have slashed roughly 2,400 Department of Veterans Affairs jobs, a decision that won't make things more efficient like they claim, but will actually lead to longer wait times, more backlog, and more chaos for our veterans. They've also launched a wider purge of federal workers, firing in total an estimated 6,000 veterans who are federal workers, including the folks behind the Veterans Crisis Hotline. The only reason that they're doing this is to try to find enough loose change behind the couch cushions so that they can give even bigger tax breaks to the rich guys they pal around with on their golf course. Let me say it another way. They care more about making sure that Mar-a-Lago billionaires can buy yet another private jet than making sure that our veterans have access to the benefits and care that they actually earned. So let's call this what it is. It's a middle finger to our heroes. It's a slap in the face to the sacrifices our veterans have made. It's BS, frankly, and every one of us who has served should feel insulted. Donald Trump now has fired more veterans than any other president in recent history. How dare a 5-time draft-dodging coward turn his back on the men and women who, unlike him, actually were brave enough to serve our nation in uniform? How dare he call himself king, and yes, he did that, and act like service members are his subjects as if they are not the reason that America is already great? How dare he and Elon Musk sit in their ivory towers and use their power to stomp on those who are feeling powerless? Listen, I heard Secretary Collins lie last week that not one veteran crisis line worker was fired in this purge. But the thing is, I've heard directly from veterans nationwide who've proven that this is untrue, who've reached out and personally shared with me their actual letters of termination. I fought to get these folks reinstated, and I'm grateful that after such a loud outcry, we were able to get a few of them their jobs back. But there are so many others still without their jobs, still left out in the cold, unsure how they'll be able to put food on the table for their families next week. Veterans who've been abandoned by the VA secretary who is supposed to have their backs. Secretary Collins has either been lied to about these firings or is knowingly, repeatedly lying to the American people. If it's the former, then all he has to do is check his casework inbox. If it's the latter, then, well, shame on you, Secretary. Shame on you. Think about it. The crisis hotline is where veterans turn when they are considering suicide or self-harm. The public servants working there are doing some of the toughest work imaginable to support our heroes in their absolute darkest hour. These are the people that Trump and Musk are happy to throw by the wayside. That should tell you everything you need to know about how this administration actually feels about our veterans. That should tell you how patriotic they really are. Trump might like to wrap himself in the flag with one hand, but with the other, he's signing off on the orders that sells out our heroes to line his own pockets. There are countless tragic examples of how DOGE's purchase already caused havoc. To name just a few, VK healthcare appointments have already been canceled due to staffing shortages. The number of beds and operating rooms at VA facilities have already been cut down, and suicide prevention training sessions have been postponed or canceled already. These jobs should never have been threatened in the first place. And for Secretary Collins to say that no damage was done here is a straight up betrayal of the people he's supposed to be serving. It's an insult to Americans like Chelsea Milburn, who's a Navy reservist who, after being fired from her job in the Department of Education, said, and I quote, "I feel like I have served my country admirably, and now it has betrayed me." It's an insult to folks like Francis Greenlee, who you'll hear from shortly. Francis is a Coast Guard veteran whose decades-long job was quite literally putting out fires on military ships, as well as fighting waste and fraud in the military budget. I guess Musk didn't seem to see the irony behind firing someone that, unlike DOGE, was actually making our government more efficient. And it's an insult to people like Jacob Adam Bushnell, a disabled veteran and a constituent of mine who joined the Army his junior year right after 9/11. Jacob served 2 tours in Iraq. Then, when he came home, despite suffering from PTSD, he dedicated his life to continuing his service, this time for the federal government, working as a wildland firefighter and forest technician, among other jobs. Jacob was part of this month's purge, and as he told my team this week, and I quote, "I've always served this country in some way, shape, or form. I've always served. I've either tried to protect our country from terrorism or bad guys or forest fires." So this has been a gut shot, a pretty bad one, and it's taken its toll on me. If Trump and Musk actually cared about veterans, they wouldn't be treating any of us like this. They aren't making our country better, they're making it worse. Jacob is right. So let me just close with this. Everyone on this call today knows how much our veterans have done for our nation. Trump and Musk may not know the first thing about sacrifice and service, but our veterans sure as hell do. So please know that I will never stop fighting for our heroes, no matter who's in the White House. But I'm counting on each of you to be my partners in this work. After all, we've already seen proof that our collective pressure campaign is working. Trump's VA was ready to cut hundreds of contracts and would have further hurt veterans' health services, from providing cancer care to assessing and accessing toxic exposure. But they were forced to backtrack because we spoke out, because we made noise. So we can't stop there. Look, I get how in this moment, it'd be easy to feel defeated, to want to tune out rather to turn on the news. But now, more than ever, we can't let ourselves become disengaged. We have to channel our outrage into action because there's too much at stake to get discouraged. There will always be people in hallowed halls who try to use their power to only look out for themselves. But here's what I know: the power of the people is always greater than the people in power. And if we want tomorrow to be better than yesterday, we have to come together. We have to recognize that our voices do matter. Then we have to use those voices to speak out, even if, especially when anyone tries to silence us. Going forward, you have my word that I am with you as I always have been. I am listening. I am one of you, and I will never abandon you because you never abandoned me. It's an absolute honor to call myself part of this team and to have you all as my partners on the front lines in this fight. With that, I want to turn it over to my constituent and fellow veteran, Dustin Conklin. Dustin.
Hi, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. I'm Dustin Conklin. I'm a veteran of the United States Navy. This fall, I took a job with the Natural Resources Conservation Service for the USDA. Prior to that, I was in Virginia. The USDA moved me out here. So I left where I was secure. I left my support network. I left friends. Me and my partner, we picked up and we came to Illinois. So I've been here since the end of September. Everything was going great. I'm going to add that my partner is also a federal employee in a probationary period who is a remote worker. So we come out here on February 13th in the middle of the night. So I had a government phone and it went off, and no one ever emails me unless it's something I got to plan for in the morning. So I open up my email and I get a blank email with an attachment titled accepted service termination during probationary period or template. So I opened it up and basically it just said I was fired for performance. I hadn't been here long enough to get a performance evaluation. My supervisor had never told me anything about my performance that wasn't good. So I was kind of confused. So I forwarded it to him. He had no idea that this was happening. So I go in the next week and they actually never were given a list of who was getting terminated is what they told me. They said the only reason they knew is because we all sent them these notices. So that's kind of where that ended, is I'm kind of waiting. I had actually responded to that email and CC'd the signatory on it, the director of the human resources. And the only response I ever got back is they'll look at it, because I had a letter that said I was terminated from the accepted service for poor performance. My appointment was to the competitive service, and there was nothing that ever told me that I had poor performance. So now that kind of leaves me in a position where I got moved out here. I don't have a support network. There's not a lot of job opportunities for an archaeologist. I'm not gonna lie. So like you kind of go where the work is, and I'm out here. So I'm going to lose my health insurance that covers me and my daughter. My health insurance is pretty important to me because I have regular therapy appointments and access to antidepressants and anxiety medication that I'm about to lose. Let's see. I still haven't gotten an updated SF50. I had to fight to get an SF8. I submitted the stuff for unemployment insurance, but they said because of how long I've been living here, it wasn't quite long enough for it to go too quickly. So they told me it could be up to 3 months until I see any of that. So that's just kind of where I'm at. And through this whole time, I just kind of see, on the internet, like, there's, Musk playing with chainsaws, the president, he's posting things laughing about making people cry. And it's just kind of like been defeating. And like, I just kind of feel like there's no point anymore. But that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. My name is Matt Cordoni. I'm with Vote Vets. We really appreciate everyone joining today. It was really important for us to put faces and names behind the numbers that you're seeing and also allow people to tell their personal stories. It was also really important for us to highlight what's being done to push back against this at the federal, state, and local level, especially by those who are Vote Vets candidates. And right now, I'd like to bring up someone who is an amazing Democratic Attorney General, who was a Vote Vets candidate, who has been really pushing back against this and can give us an update from his state. I'm going to turn it over now to Attorney General Nick Brown from the state of Washington. Thank you, Attorney General.
Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone at Vote Vets for organizing this important conversation today. and special appreciation to Senator Duckworth, who has been leading on veterans-related issues for many, many years now, and really appreciate your leadership. As Matt said, my name is Nick Brown. I'm the Attorney General for the great state of Washington and came into office just last month. But like many people on this call, my career started in the military, where I was on active duty as an Army JAG lawyer from 2003 to 2007. And I come from a family of veterans, like so many of you. My grandparents were in the military. My father was a career Army officer, and my mother was an Army nurse. And they always pushed me to care about what was happening in the community, in large part instilled in them by their service in the United States Army. And I'm so thankful to have started my career as an Army officer and to have served with people from all across this country during very, very difficult times. And it is an important foundation for me. And I bring that to bear as the Attorney General for the state of Washington. And Washington State has so many veterans all across the state. We have one of the higher veterans populations in the country, and just under 500,000 veterans in Washington State today. And what we're seeing happening at a national level on a myriad of different areas is really disturbing. It is disturbing because of the lack of care and concern that the federal administration is showing for people who have literally put their lives on for this country. And it is disturbing because of the impacts it is going to have on the services that are being provided to veterans and the jobs that veterans are filling all across my state and all across this country. And when we talk about these cuts, we're talking about cuts to things like healthcare, housing, education, workforce development, all the things that are vitally important to making sure that veterans get the benefit of the bargain that they made with the United States when they decided to serve. And it is really offensive to me to see the recklessness by which we've seen President Trump and Elon Musk operate, because it is doing real damage. And every time I see the president talk about, or other people in office talk about how there's not going to be impact to services when we make these cuts, I really think it's just absurd, because we all know that when you cut 2,400 jobs of veterans, when you cut jobs all across the federal service, that those people are doing real important work on behalf of the public, and services already being impacted. Just in the last few days alone here in Washington, we've started to hear about the services that will no longer be available or will be substantially delayed because of the cuts that we're seeing in Washington. And if you spread that impact all across this country in blue states and red states, we're going to see veterans whose lives are upended because of these cuts. And we need to do everything that we can to try to fight back about that. And let me just say, as an Attorney General, I'm so excited to be joined by other Attorney Generals in this country who are looking very closely at every executive order that comes out from the White House to see what action we can take to protect veterans and to protect the rest of the public from these disastrous cuts. And we've started to do that work both in our litigative work and in our advocacy. There are attorney generals, including myself on behalf of the state of Washington, who have fought in court to stop some of these cuts from happening. With the OMB funding cuts that were proposed a couple of weeks ago, successfully moved for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction to stop those cuts from doing damage. We intervened, moved in a case with the cuts of the National Institute of Health that provides life-saving research and services to people all across the state, and successfully convinced the judge to stop those cuts from being implemented. But even though we're seeing judges tell the administration to stop these cuts, we're still hearing about problems. And many of the cuts, including those cuts to the Veterans Administration, have come after those court orders. So we're looking really closely to see if there's additional legal action that we can take. But it's also really important that we find ways to fight back across the spectrum. And as Senator Duckworth and others have said, I encourage you and really implore all of you to make your voices heard to your representatives in your states and in your districts. They need to feel the pressure and understand the stories that can be told and the lives that are being impacted by these cuts, because that pressure can help make a difference, and it can help force the conversation in a new direction. Because I know that pressure can change lives and get things back to the status quo and make sure that veterans have the services and the jobs that they are entitled to as people who have sacrificed this country. And in Washington, there's so many veterans who are worried now, even if they haven't been immediately impacted. And we are being responsive as an office and as an agency to advocate for them, because my office does so much on behalf of veterans, irrespective of what's happening in Washington, D.C. We advocate for veterans protections and consumer rights protections, civil rights cases, and many others. And I want to make sure that we can continue to do that work for them as we move forward. And we need to have a partnership with the federal government to really be truly effective. And it's very clear that we're just not going to see that from President Trump, despite all of his bombastic statements about being a supporter of veterans. We just know that that's a lie, like so many other things that this president has said. But I want to make sure that we elevate the people that are most directly impacted. And I'm so excited to be joined by another Washingtonian from Lake Stevens, Washington, a proud veteran from the Coast Guard, Francis Greeley. And I'd love to have Francis Greeley join this conversation. Thank you, everyone else.
Thank you, Attorney General Nick Brown. Like many people on the call, I've always wanted to be a civil servant. I am the child of two civil servants, state workers, and my mom didn't need to turn on the TV to see the Twin Towers fall. She saw it fall from her office window when she was a state worker in New Jersey. That inspired me both the service to join the Coast Guard, and I started a week after my high school graduation. Like probably a lot of veterans in Washington, I was stationed out here, so I decided I never wanted to leave the great state and go back to New Jersey. During my time in the Coast Guard, I was a naval engineering officer, which meant that I worked in the engineering department, fought the fires on the old ships, and also ran all of the maintenance contracts on the ships. Coast Guard doesn't have the best budget, and so it was very important for the people managing the contracts to get the best use of the dollar, do excellent quality assurance, and make sure there's not waste, fraud, and abuse. When I got out, I ended up working and wanted to work for the General Service Administration's Federal Acquisition Service, who are the acquisitions experts. We're the front lines of preventing waste, fraud, and abuse. I know how government contracts work. I was a project management specialist. I had been a Corps in the Coast Guard contracting officer representative. We're the people who write the scope of works, increase competition, and do all of the things that save the government money in the end. It's not as sexy as the archaeologist or as cool, but it's vitally important for the government to prevent the waste, fraud, and abuse, to spend the dollars correctly. Like Dustin, my supervisors didn't know I was terminated. I forwarded them the termination letter. I hadn't been at this job long enough to have a performance evaluation. However, my performance was stellar. They loved me despite having an accident where I hurt my hand. I was still able to do my work fine and volunteered for everything, because when you're on a Coast Guard ship in the middle of the Bering Sea, you have to have teamwork. And I still live by that. I still live, if you need help at work, doesn't matter, I'm going to help you. And I was doing my job successfully, and they missed me. And I was fired by a political appointee in a form letter that whenever I open it, it asks, do you want to save changes to this form? GSA hasn't been saying. They've said they fire probationary employees at TTS, which is not the division I work for. They haven't actually reported on the two divisions I worked for. I'm also a veteran that uses the VA for my care, and that impacts me too. And I understand what they actually mean when they say those contracts and that type of thing. And if you want it to increase the federal contracting and then increase the transparency and best use of the dollars, you'd be increasing personnel who project management specialists and contracting officers. So that's not what they terminated me instead and surprised my boss by it. I was supporting the DOD too at the time. This is not people. We're not lazy, the federal workers. My parents weren't lazy when they worked in state psychiatric hospitals. I wasn't lazy when I was in the Bering Sea and the Caribbean and trying to keep ships older than me running. And I wasn't lazy when I was working on federal contractors. Thank you very much for hearing my story.
Thank you very much for sharing. Just want to remind everyone, we're being joined right now by folks from across the country. We had over 2,500 people RSVP from our grassroots network of veterans, military families, and their allies. We encourage you to submit any questions you might have in the chat. We'll try to get to a few at the end. But in the meantime, we're now going to hear from one of our local leaders, Baltimore County Councilor Pat Young, who's going to talk about ways that he's both helping and finding new ways to get engaged at the local level. So over to you. Thank you.
Matt, thank you. Again, I'm Councilman Pat Young, representing District 1 on the Baltimore County Council. And thanks to VoteVets for organizing this, inviting me to participate on an esteemed panel, folks such as Senator Tammy Duckworth, as well as Attorney General Nick Brown, and the other veterans that are really feeling what we're concerned about, feeling the pinch of what we know is going on, and we know is already affecting veterans across this entire country. I have in my district the headquarters for Social Security Administration and for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. We're scared, not just for the impact that this is going to have on the federal workforce, but for the services that veterans receive from Social Security, from Medicare, from Medicaid. The thing that gets lost here is the fact that when there's a false narrative about who is doing this work for the federal government, which goes in line with so many false narratives that have been presented to try and get people riled up, to distrust teachers, distrust the federal government, distrust federal workers. Everyone's trying to get by and doing the best that they can. I've never met a single person that works at Social Security that isn't trying to do the best they can for the folks that they're supposed to serve. And what happens is we have veterans that receive these benefits, that have their family members that benefit from these programs and these workers and the things that they do, that cutting back without any strategy, without any thought into the impact it'll have on other folks, affects our veterans. We already know that it's hard enough to get veterans, that are younger veterans too, to participate or utilize their VA benefits when it comes to GI Bill or comes to healthcare. The number of folks that actually receive services, that could receive services, are so few compared to how many could actually benefit. This is just another barrier that's going to prevent folks from receiving care, receiving the things that they've earned through their own service in any branch of the military. We've seen it before too. We do everything that we can to get the word out about how can someone access the benefits that they're entitled to, that they've earned through service. And part of the thought was, and we feel this way now, what can we do? What do we want people to do? What access or what sort of opportunity do folks have to engage with elected officials? And I know that it was mentioned before through Senator Duckworth, Attorney General Brown. Contact your elected officials. Reach out, participate. But there's more that we're doing here in Baltimore County, at least, because we're not going to sit by and just let this happen and be quiet about it. In the last 2 weeks, we've actively identified 3 VFW and American Legion posts utilizing the community and the network of veterans that we already have around the Baltimore region to set up 3 specific veteran resource fairs for their families and for them, so that they're affected by VA cuts, if they're affected by cuts at Social Security or Medicaid, whether it's through working there or through receiving benefits there, so that they can have access to benefits that we have at the county level, benefits that we have at the state level, including our nonprofit partners that are providing services already to veterans across the state, and also welcoming our federal partners as well to come table and be available to talk with our vets who are feeling anger and fear, just like I do, about what it means for Baltimore County, what it means for the veteran population here. I'll say that in the last 2 months, 3 months since the election in November, making the decision that staying at the council level just isn't for me. We need to do more. And we need to use the resources and the talent that we have, that we've earned, and that we've also cultivated through our service in the military, to then run for a higher office. And today I announced my candidacy for the county executive position of Baltimore County, to serve everyone, including the veteran population that lives here. We have so much opportunity and so much skill to provide. Our service doesn't end after we get out of the military, but the question is, how do we then activate it to do better in our communities? And I can say right now that if you're thinking about getting involved in the process, reach out to your elected official, introduce yourself, and see how you can get involved, whether that's running for office, helping out with a nonprofit, serving on your community board, running for school board. We have far too few veterans serving in elected office, and it hadn't always been that way. I believe we were better for it when we had more voices from folks that took time out of their lives to serve our nation than we do now, when we have folks that generally serve themselves before anybody else. We need more veterans in active public life, and we shouldn't be shy about our service, and we shouldn't be shy about the skills we bring to the table and the perspective that we have. Now, I'm proud to be joined by a fellow Marylander and a veteran who has a story to tell about his own personal experience and his own fears related to the future that are directly involved and directly related to the cuts that have been made at the federal level. Mr. Kyle Lewis.
Hey, thank you, Councilman Young. I appreciate that. Thank you for being here. It's good to see your shipmate. Just really quick, I also want to thank Matt and everyone at Vote Vets, as well as Major General Eaton, Senator Duckworth, and AG Brown for being here. I really appreciate that as well. You guys being here as well. So my story is a little bit different from one that you've heard thus far. I joined the Navy way back in the 1990s, the late 1990s, the relative calm of the late 1990s. I'm actually, while I live in Maryland now, you can probably see behind me, I'm a California kid, and I remain that at heart. So my idea back then was, you know what, I'm going to join the Navy and I'm going to surf all over the world. And then something called 9/11 happened, and that drastically changed my plans. And I got to see parts of the world that I never thought I was going to see. But that's okay. It was an adventure, right? After my time in uniform in the Navy, I spent another 15 years as a counterterrorism analyst, with the U.S. government. Before I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in January 2020. I was given 6 weeks to live back in January 2020. My doctor said, if you don't start this experimental and aggressive treatment now, you're not going to be here much longer. And I was fortunate. I was fortunate to get into a clinical trial at Johns Hopkins, which was funded by the National Institutes of Health. I say was funded because it's not anymore. The cuts that DOGE has made to cancer research, as well as other life-saving medical research, has put my cancer treatment at risk, as well as the treatment of millions of Americans, including veterans and children who are in far, far worse situations than I am. You know, I'm here, I'm a fighter, I was born a fighter, my parents might be on the line, they can back that up. Defiance is my middle name. And so I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to find a way to get through this one way or another, even if the Institutes of Health can no longer pay for my cancer treatment. I'll find a way to get through. But there are people out there that are far more vulnerable than I am, that don't have those opportunities or aren't in a position to fight in the way that I am. And I just find this absolutely, quite frankly, disgusting as an American. This is not how we take care of our family. This is not how we take care of our friends. And this is not how we take care of our communities. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you so much. We'll bring other folks back up. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but did have a few quick questions I'm going to get to if possible. There are some folks asking in the chat about your engagement with your state and local leaders, and if you've had any experience with that and what that process has been like, or if you have any tips or suggestions for folks.
I mean, I'll go first if you guys, I'll be very brief. Yes, I have. I've started at the very local level, just like you said, simple call, simple email. I happen to have been out at a couple of protests as well. And so I've made some inroads there. But you know, I'm lucky. I live in Maryland, which is a very blue state. I live in a very blue congressional district as well. I got great people like Pat right next door to me. And so it's been easy for me to talk to these people because they've been very willing and eager to hear my stories. And quite frankly, they're looking for stories like this, like ours right now, because they see numbers. They see these horrific numbers flashed across the screen. DOGE is making all these cuts, and Americans everywhere can't really make sense of them. They're not entirely sure what it means until you put a face to those numbers. And all of a sudden, it's someone you know. It's someone that looks like your cousin, someone that looks like your uncle. Oh my gosh, I heard this happen to my neighbor. And then this starts to get people thinking about things in a way that maybe they didn't before. And so, yes, absolutely start at the local level. That's what I did. And now, thanks to Vote Vets, I have a meeting with my congressional representative next week in Washington, D.C. So get out there, make your voice heard, let them see your face, and we'll get together and we'll work this thing out together.
I can also say I've also been contacting my senators and my representative Like Kyle, I live in a very blue state. Attorney General Brown is amazing at supporting the veterans and supporting the state, as are our 2 senators and my congressional district. One of the other things I've been doing is, as I said, I didn't grow up in Washington. I grew up in a Republican district, actually, in New Jersey. So my mom is also, and trying to recruit my mom and family that are still there to get on the district that maybe they can help, as giving awareness of, hey, thought you supported veterans. My daughter just got fired. What are you doing about it? I don't know how much is helping, but she's trying. So trying to also, if you know people who live in an area like that, also contact those people. Tell that story.
Thank you. And I think that's a great segue to bring up my colleague, Travis, who will close it out for us here at Vote Vets. Thank you all very much for being willing to come forward and tell your stories.
Really appreciate it. I am coming in as the final speaker today to deliver a big call to action to everybody here. I want to first thank all the speakers that came here. I want to thank the senator. I want to thank the attorney general. I want to thank the councilman. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate also the other speakers coming and telling their stories. And that's going to lead me to my first call to action. Is you have to get out there and tell your stories. Right now, you have thousands and thousands of veterans being fired from the federal government, and that is going to cause downstream effects. So we are going to post a tip line in the chat section. Please send us your stories. Tell us what's going on. Tell us what's happening. Your stories have the largest impact on moving the ball forward and helping us stop what's happening. So please go to this tip line. And it's not just for folks that are getting fired right now. They're like the councilman said earlier, there are going to be downstream effects. There are going to be veterans who are not going to be able to receive benefits. Who are not going to be able to get appointments in their VA. There are going to be all kinds of downstream effects that are going to happen from this. And there are going to be veterans that are going to be really hurting. And we have to get those stories out. We have to be able to tell those stories to the American public so we can stop and slow this stuff down. And then secondarily, I would also encourage every single person to get out there and kind of do what Kyle Lewis is doing. Go to the town halls. Encourage your elected officials to have town halls. Get out there and speak your mind about this stuff. People need to hear it. And you see all over the country, you have Republicans who don't want to have town halls. They don't want to answer any of these questions. So show up to them, get in their face and talk to them. Ask them why they are being silent on these issues right now. So you have an offline call to action. Get out there to the town halls, and an online action of give us your stories. Go to the tip line, give it to your friends, put it on Facebook, put it on socials. And let's tell more stories about veterans being impacted and try to stop this madness. That's the end of our call today. Thank you so much for joining. Again, thank you for all the speakers. We hope you all have a wonderful day.